If
a
you want
little bit about what
uh-huh.
happened.
Yeah. Go
We're
ahead.
good.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking just where we were in terms of when the order came and following the governor's decree, right, to stay home and whatnot. And so how you all pivoted, and you were explaining how you had this sort of two-pronged approach, that you're still going to serve community and do these nightly lectures or talks, and you were going to focus on a food bank. So do you want to pick it up there? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's good. So the food bank, we've helped about 700 families, and it's the Colorado Muslim Food Relief is the name of it. So it's going to be a mission that's going to be years to go, because this crisis, this economic crisis and social crisis, isn't going to end. And as the economy gets worse and people lose more jobs, there's going to be a need for food. So from our organization side, as establishments around the state of Colorado, we've connected to help benefit the local communities at each masjid, and anybody that reaches out to us, Muslim and non-Muslim. So from the organizational side, we look to our community and we said, you guys are going to be in need. We know that there's going to be people in the Denver metro area, or in the northern community in Fort Collins, or the southern community in Colorado Springs, the western community in Golden, and the eastern communities out in Aurora and stuff that are going to need support. And we wanted to make that pledge to the communities who have supported us and the cities who have supported us, and really support the people in this time of need. Yeah. Yeah, so we worked through what Rashad has been talking about. Like when we had the mission and the vision of the mosque, we tried as much as we can to focus on the spiritual aspect as well as the community service aspect, and as well the education aspect. So these are the three main keywords here in the mosque, or what we're planning to, or what we are working on. The spiritual aspects, providing a safe and welcoming space for Muslims and non-Muslims to come and connect with God. If some non-Muslims want to come and see how Muslims worship, or to do some, like for example, one time we had a message from a Jewish person want to come and pray here. We told them, okay, that's fine, come and pray. So that aspect, in terms of the physical space that facilitates the spiritual nurturing for the Muslims, it's kind of like suspended temporarily. So we moved virtually. This is why we're working as much as we can. Before Ramadan, we have been having like community virtual meetings with the community asking questions, connecting how we're going to Ramadan, how we were going to prepare for Ramadan, and suggestions for that, and how can we navigate and make meanings out of the pandemic and the crisis and something like the plagues or these things. And in the Muslim history, we have a lot of traditions and a lot of history that can kind of like back this up, how Muslims can navigate trials and tribulations that what we're going on. And then since Ramadan started, nightly lectures or sessions, you might call it this way, is not services. It's kind of like nightly things related to that. And we were also touching three aspects: the spiritual and knowledge aspect, and the history aspect as well. One of them is about the life of the Prophet, learning his life and seeing how he has gone through a lot of tribulations and tests in his life, and how can we connect this to us as Muslims, being himself as a role model, know our Quran and connect, because Ramadan is famous for being the month of Quran, because that's the month when the Quran was first revealed to the Prophet according to the Muslim narrative. And the third one is reviving our hearts. And that one touching different aspects of how to revive our hearts through prayers, through night prayers, and connect with God through observing our actions with God, patience, supplications and prayer to God, and how that works in reviving our own hearts. Like last night, we talked about patience and how patience is a Muslim kind of like Muslim treasure that we can draw on and see how we are going to play with it, and what are the benefits of patience, what are the losses that if we do not have patience, and what are the 8 facilities to kind of like practice patience in a more consistent and long-term way. That's what we've been doing so far to kind of like make up the spiritual aspect. The civic engagement aspect and the community services, that's through the food bank. And also we still open for like marriage counseling. If people need to talk about this, we might have like in person here with observing the social distancing and observing that aspect in it.
Or like, for example, I had a person converted to Islam, like that was 2 weeks ago at the beginning of Ramadan. And she was here and talked about that. We had a marriage service happened here with the observing the number of less than 10. There were 6, and observing the social distancing. So kind of like, probably we are temporarily suspended in something, and that's not something that we would love to have, but at least as much as we can, we're trying to make up the as much as we can things that are part of our mission, being touching or helping the community in terms of education and spirituality, as well as community services as well.
And it's really interesting because one of the lectures he's doing is the life of the Prophet. And as he's touching on the initial parts, and this kind of touches to how we can draw our faith back to stories in Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, when he came, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he came to the people of Quraysh, the people of Mecca initially, it was him and a few people. And it's kind of the same idea here in Denver. We started out as a small ummah, us and just a few families, or a collection of less than 10,000 initially, in a city of millions, and how we've grown and worked to adapt and talk to the different communities and work with the different communities. So you kind of look at the life of the Prophet and say, how did he manage this? How did he work with the fact that he's a singular person or a small group of people believing in a certain faith, and the majority of the people around him do not believe in their faith and do not follow their cause and stuff, and really taking that patience and the different aspects that he tells us to focus on, and guiding it towards how we guide this masjid and how we guide our interactions in our daily lives.
Tell us, I'm just so curious about the needs of your community right now. You mentioned, there are these spiritual needs from rites of passage like marriage or becoming Muslim, but also economic needs. Where do a lot of the community members work? You mentioned, East and North and South and West. Tell us a little bit about who comprises your community and kind of just some of who they are.
It's really spread out. So it depends on which masjid you speak to. For our masjid, we're downtown. So I could say about 95% of our population or our congregation were Uber drivers and taxi drivers and Lyft drivers, and they gained their income from transportation, commuters and stuff. So a majority of our congregation had lost their job. And that's actually overall on most of the community, because of the other masjids, a lot of restaurant owners that had to close or change how they operated their restaurants. A lot of business owners that owned non-essential businesses, whether it be computer-based services or hair salons, or whatever the case may be, they had to close their businesses. And it put a strain. So a lot of that aspect, we stopped pushing for the economic drive. Historically, we always did our fundraisers during the month of Ramadan to gain enough income for the whole year. And we didn't do that this year because we couldn't look to our community to have them pay to keep the masjid open when they themselves don't even have enough money to pay their rent or their mortgages, buy their groceries and stuff. So that's why we kind of responded a little bit differently and say, hey, we're not going to ask, we're going to give right now. And our masjid, we're a little bit small. We couldn't help with financial services for renting, but we chase the food, and we keep giving out food every day. Today, actually, at Masjid Ikhlas up north in the North Glen community, they've been working with the city of North Glen to do a food drive up there. We sent a bunch of groceries up there. They packaged them. We've been getting a lot of help from the Colorado Census, or I guess it's the United States Census, because they've been giving us a lot of reusable grocery bags to package the groceries and send them to the families. So it's economically, it's really difficult for our community because we're not like most communities where we hold, different prestigious jobs and stuff. A lot of our community is low-level workers, working in the bottom end of industries and stuff, making, smaller amounts of wages and stuff, and a lot of them lost their jobs. And, in aspect to the meatpacking plant up north, when they talk about that area, it's a lot of Somalian refugees who work there, who are Muslim refugees, and themselves getting sick and the different environments they have to deal with working at the meatpacking plants. and now the meatpacking plants closing, or them having to take weeks off of work. These communities are a lot of refugee-based communities who don't have financial backgrounds able to stay home from work for weeks on end. So that was the big strain, and that was the big scare to our leaderships was, where is our community needing? And we put out a survey actually the first few weeks of the shutdown, and we asked our community, what do you need from us? As leaderships, what do you need from us? Do you guys need food? Do you guys need money? Do you guys need vocational support? And the two biggest things they said was, we need help with food, and we need help retraining ourselves into different industries. We were taxi cab drivers, and that industry is going to be dead for another few months. There's not going to be a lot of travel. There's not going to be a lot of movement going on. So they said, how help us sign up for Instacart, help us sign up for DoorDash, help us sign up for Grubhub and Uber Eats, and these different organizations that are helping us. So it was really just this restructuring of jobs and finding these brothers, because they can't stay home. They have no financial support to stay home. So they had to go and find an essential job that they would work at. And a lot of the food support we're doing are to refugee families who they can be either undocumented refugees or documented refugees, and it's just the support they get isn't large enough to help them. So we kind of just wanted to make sure everybody, and to the Hispanic community in Commerce City, who they're undocumented, they have no way to get help. They don't get the stimulus checks, they don't get food stamps, they don't get support. So how are they going to be able to survive as these months go? And we really wanted to reach out to them and make sure they're supported in this time of need as well. As an organization, we're not looking at what your faith is. We're looking at it, do you have kids who need? Because it was the famous thing that came out years ago that for the impoverished kids, most of their nutrition comes from schools. Mm-hmm. With schools being closed, they need food still, and we have to make sure that they're getting that food at home now.
And yeah, that you remind me also, we coordinated with International Rescue Committee here in Colorado, and we provided them with 75 care packages. Like they give us the list and of their current refugees that they are serving now, and we alhamdulillah, or thanks God, we got this done last week. We provided 75 care packages to people houses. One of the things as well that we kind of putting a lot of attention on is a lot of people, as is mentioned in the Quran, that there are two types of people who are poor. Some people who are poor but they are explicit about it, they're asking people for help, and some people are poor but they are shy or ashamed from that. And that's what we're trying to pay attention to, because being an Islamic part of it is, how are we going to provide support to people without any person knowing. So this is why the Quran emphasized in this, saying when you give publicly, that's good, but when you give privately, that's much better. And that aspect of giving privately to people who are in need, for example, 2 days ago, I had a call from older lady. She's a refugee, and she told me, when are you going to bring us food back, because we're out from the first care package they sent us. I told her, okay, but there's a mosque next to you. They are doing drive-through tomorrow, which is Thursday. They're doing drive-through on Thursday. Go and pick it up. Said, I know, but I'm shy and I don't want people to know that I'm in need and all of that. Said, okay, so that's fine. We're going to do another round with this. So that type of aspects that people do not pay attention to that much. That so many people have so much pride that they do not want to expose their poverty or their need. And that's one of the things that I actually, when we were talking with Rashad, I told him we need to focus on providing food to the people's houses. One time, there were somebody, no person was free to give one package to someone in Littleton. So I went to her, and when she saw me, she burst in tears. And just a lot of people are kind of touched in this, they don't want to be seen that they are in need. They don't want their friends or their neighbors to see them that they are taking something. And that's one of the things that a lot of people are going through.
And it just causes me to reflect on, this is such an international community with so many ties to many countries. Mm-hmm. And during this time, just feeling even more isolated or pulled apart, how are you seeing communities stay in touch with their home countries? Is this at all something that comes up?
So being myself, I'm in touch with my family back. Being I'm the only person here in my family, and being in touch with them almost every day or every other day. Of course, like internet makes it super easy now for people to keep in touch with their home country, and I think that's the case with a lot of immigrants or refugees. Being in touch through like phone calls or internet, and that's kind of easier now to be in touch with that. The struggle is for a lot of immigrants or refugees, they have their families back home. Some of them are in need of help and they have consistent help to them. They send them money every month or so. And that was one of the big struggles because they cannot help them anymore because of the strain of financial resources that they generate here because of the COVID impact. I think that's also one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people who have ties outside the US. Being care of them. Like, for example, I know my family, my dad is retired, my mom is a housewife, I have 4 sisters. So in that case, now they've been home for a while, they just like, they do nothing but they just live their lives and they need support somehow financially or something like that. And the case goes on. I know a lot of people have lots of families back home and they help, for example, their cousins or their nephews, someone is getting married, they help them with something. So I think that's what that's what they are going through. But in terms of connection, it's easier now with the internet, I guess, to be connected. At least in my case, I know maybe some other people I was visiting, the ICE detention center here in Aurora, and some people like cannot connect with their families because they do not have that resource. So if you have the resource of internet, then you're good. Otherwise, it must be difficult for a lot of people.
It's interesting. I think the big aspect is in communication when it talks about the international global community. You worry most about the healthcare systems because most of our countries where the people immigrate from, they don't have strong healthcare systems. The Imam, his situation is a little bit different being in Egypt. They have a little bit better of education or a healthcare system. But in a lot of the countries where my dad's from, Libya, they have, it's known they don't have a healthcare system. So the scare isn't necessarily can we talk to them. The scare is what happens when COVID does make it to those countries. Are they going to have the resources and the ability to be able to fight, and the education, to be honest with you? Are they going to have the knowledge of how to protect themselves from this virus, especially in communities like the Muslim community where bringing family together during the month of Ramadan and bringing your groups together is such a big part of your life and your culture that it's a very dangerous disease for the international Muslim community, and especially in Africa and the impoverished areas in India, for example. It's very famous that they said that most Indians, I think it was like 30 or 40% of Indians in India don't have access to healthcare or bathrooms or cleaning supplies. So it's going to be interesting to see as the months go how the virus performs in these countries versus how it's gone here in America and in Europe and in China, the first world countries, how the third world countries have been affected by it. And I think that's the big scare a lot of people have, my dad included. He calls his family regularly, checking up on them, making sure nobody's gotten sick and stuff, because that's the scare is if you get sick, you can't just drive, 8 hours or 10 hours to the hospital because that country won't let you in. Egypt, they closed their borders. A lot of the African countries have closed their borders to people to come for healthcare and stuff. So it's going to be a scare for some of these African countries who don't have the healthcare systems inside their country. How do they deal with it? And I think that's kind of one of the situations that I've heard personally. What the scare is what happens when COVID makes its way through Africa or through the impoverished areas.
And also here, a lot of people. Like, for example, I had a call from someone from California talking about his friend. He's tested as COVID positive and he's in hospital and he has no one here. And he told me, I know nobody can come and visit him because he's the only person of his family here and his family cannot connect with him from home, and just pray for him. He just called to pray for him because going through all of that and being in intensive care by himself. And that's also one of the things that some community members here might have gone through or they're going through, like this, being scared from being affected by that, and just they have to navigate this in their own. not their family around them or nobody supported them. And yeah, these are all kinds of struggles that many refugees and immigrants go through.
So just two things to kind of finish. The first is how you are all balancing these dichotomous pulls, right? To keep your community safe and of course to take the guidelines of the governor and the state, but also to really honor that need to be together in community, to worship together, knowing this is a resource to help get us through these times. And so how do you negotiate that path forward? And also, it seems like you're in that role of an educator as well in terms of helping the community understand the impact of COVID. And then the last question could be, you know, in 100 years, this is kind of the historian question. In 100 years from now, what would you like folks listening to this oral history or reading the transcript to know? What is the thing about perhaps your community or what this moment has meant for your community that you'd want people to take away?
It kind of it brings me back to the story of the Navajo Nation with the Irish, and that during the potato famine, the Navajo Nation helped the Irish. I mean, that's the idea: is to one part be an American citizen and say, okay, we have a responsibility to our community members to help them and to make sure that our neighbors next door to us have food and have the supplies they need. And on the other aspect, say, hey, this is an immigrant population. We're a Muslim population, and we want to show that we're caring for our communities 100 years from now by saying, hey, when this COVID started, we went out and delivered food. We put our lives on the line by going to Restaurant Depot, by going to Sam's Club, going to the grocery stores, picking up the groceries, and delivering them to your house. And we did it, you know, with social distancing, dropping it off on the front door, ringing the doorbell, wearing masks and gloves and stuff. And just the idea that when the crisis happened, we responded by making sure our communities who are around us are supported and not worrying about ourselves and worrying about how we keep our community safe or our Muslim community safe, how we keep our larger community safe as a Colorado community or a Denver metro area community. And then in the aspect of the push and pull of keeping the community together and stuff, you know, there's so many. It's nice to see the younger parts, the millennials, kind of start taking their form in leaderships in the masjids and getting these Zoom calls going or these Facebook Live. They're doing workout sessions together and they're doing iftar events together, breaking their fast together on video calls and stuff, and just keeping the contact together and stuff, and really trying to isolate your family from other families and not going to their houses and having dinner, but finding a way to have dinner together and stuff. Our masjid, you know, the big thing was to just keep the education going, keep the food going. But from a larger community perspective, as a Muslim society in Colorado, I've seen, you know, events where they're pulling people in to do workout sessions and eating together and breaking bread together. And then the different drive-through events. They have this restaurant sponsoring dinner tonight. That go to that restaurant, they're going to hand out food, and this restaurant sponsoring it at the school, hand out food there, and different hot food events to, you know, they package food together for a family and give it to them. And it's not necessarily for at-need families. This is just for a family to kind of feel. It's famous that every Ramadan we have food at the masjids. So instead of having food at the masjid, we get the food for your family together, and you guys have a hot food for your family that's presented from somebody else cooking it. So the mothers have a break too.
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't have the much to add on, and from like education perspective is to draw similar situations for early Muslims or the Prophet's life or from Islamic traditions, and to make people make sense. Yeah, that's not a new thing that happened before, and people navigated it, and that's something that's in Islamic theology or understanding or Islamic traditions, like going through trials. That's one of the natures of life. Like Islam acknowledges that very clearly, and the Quran talks about it explicitly, that life is all about struggles and all about challenges. And it's a period of time that you go through for something bigger, which is life after death and the eternal. So it is a temporary thing that you're going through a lot of struggles, and that's the nature of this life. You need to be armed with patience and hope and making meanings, and also looking at this as kind of like expiating your mistakes and cleansing you spiritually and also externally as well. So these are, from an education perspective, is making sure that the community know that no matter what's happening, it is something that has a reason behind it, and is something that's meaningful. How it is meaningful, go ahead and try to unpack what's happening and see what's that. Also, the individualism or individualistic aspect in Islam, that being in direct relationship with God, is also being emphasized now. Like, it doesn't matter if the community is gone, God is still there. The connection with God is still there. It's even more pure because you're not worried about showing off. You're not worried about people praising you. It's all about you and God. And the idea of when things are more challenging, worshiping and connecting with God is more rewarded and more appreciated. So now, at the time of challenges, actually, you might be multiplied. Your actions might be multiplied, and even more than that. And the drawing from the Islamic traditions, all the backup about these themes, that kind of like the big themes now, that kind of like trying to spread out among the Muslim community, and also to draw attention to the marginalized members of the community, like converts who convert to Islam and they do not have family whatsoever, and they spend Ramadan by themselves. And how can we start understanding that we have members of the community that do not have any connection, and they used to be there and nobody heard about them? Like that, also to expand our own self-awareness and society or social self-awareness as well.
Before we finish, I wanted to give a little brief history of the masjid. The masjid started in 90, I want to say Masjid Shuhada started in the 90s at the Wells Fargo building down on 26th and Welton. In their basement, they allowed the masjid to open. And in the early 2000s, it was there. And then in 2007, they left the Wells Fargo building and came here. Brother Bilal, Imam Bilal, he was the Imam at the time who brought it to this masjid. So it's been here since 2007, 13 years. It's been always known as Masjid Shuhada since then. And about 2 years ago, we started the actual organization, the Downtown Denver Islamic Center. So if you look historically, it's been known as the Masjid Shuhada since 2007, and actually before that at the Wells Fargo building, I think it was the late 90s, early 2000s that it started. And then now it's the Downtown Denver Islamic Center, but we also are still named Masjid Shuhada.
And it started with African American communities. Mostly or majority of it. Like the previous Imam was an African American member, and kind of like serve in the downtown area or the 5 Points area. Are you still there?
Oh, it froze again.
Hello? SubhanAllah. Hello? Marisa, are you still there?
Hello. Hello.